Hello and welcome to today's webinar titled Using Digital Tools to Make Volunteering More Accessible. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Now, the target audience for this session, for whom this webinar is designed, is VISTA members serving in outreach, communication, and marketing roles generally. But regardless of your role within your VISTA project, we are very glad to have you and know that these skills from this session, you'll hear from Kathy in just a bit, they'll be able to help you moving forward in your careers as well and just in general professional development. So thank you for being here. My name is Chris Hawks. I'm a training specialist for AmeriCorps Vista and RPCV, or Return Peace Corps volunteer from Belize, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. You'll also see our webinar support team, LSI, monitoring the chat and Q&A throughout the presentation, as well as my colleague, Stephen Bronskill. I'm joined today by Kathy Lenz with Development Plus, Inc. Kathy has been working with AmeriCorps sites for over 26 years, as well as a consultant for various federal agencies working on health and human services with U.S. nonprofit partners, addressing the needs of the most vulnerable sectors of our communities. Really love to have Kathy today. She previously served as a trainer for Peace Corps in Guatemala. So Kathy, thank you so much for being here. Bienvenidos and welcome.
Thank you, Chris. I have to admit, I am so glad to join you, especially for this particular topic. I got to tell you, I see so many advances happening in digital marketing that can be so useful to the AmeriCorps Vista members. I just want to get us started. During our time together, we'll cover quite a bit of information that's going to help you use digital marketing, and that's so that we can make that volunteering more accessible. First, we'll discuss what equity is in digital marketing and why it's important to your VISTA service. Then we'll explore equitable digital marketing for volunteer recruitment. We'll finish our time together with a Q&A session, and you'll leave with some tools to use in your VISTA service. This webinar will be especially helpful for those working to recruit volunteers, help with communications, and promoting equity. We have a lot of important and helpful information to cover, so let's get started. I want to first begin with defining what digital marketing is. Digital marketing, also called online marketing, is the promotion of brands to connect with potential customers and users through the internet and other forms of digital communication. Essentially, if a marketing campaign involves digital communication, it's digital marketing. In today's session, we're going to focus on strategy and how it connects to the content and channels our nonprofits decide to use to meet our goals. You may have heard of the various types of digital marketing, things like social media marketing, content marketing, email marketing, SMS or text marketing, and affiliate marketing, and that's just to name a few. It is safe to say that digital marketing encompasses a very wide range of strategies, also that we can achieve an even more wide range of goals. As you do your work as an AmeriCorps Vista member at your particular site, part of your effort is helping your nonprofit establish their digital marketing strategy, content, and channels. Our digital marketing strategy is like a playbook. It helps us meet our goals and avoid the frustration of wrong decisions. It gets us where we want to go, and it gets us there faster.
Thanks so much, Kathy. And now, before we kind of fully jump into the session and materials, we'd like to hear from you about how equity may be important in your service. So for this activity, we will be using a whiteboard site called Mural, and I'll explain quickly how to use the site in case you haven't used it. So in the chat, you'll see a link to this collaborative whiteboard where you'll be able to see each other's responses. So just select the Mural link now in the chat to access the whiteboard. And then after you select the link, you'll be presented with a welcome window. No need to create an account, no need to sign in. You can just click view as a visitor at the bottom, and that option located right below the two buttons. And then if you click view as visitor on the next screen, again, you can either enter your name, that's totally fine, or you can remain anonymous and just say view as a visitor, that's totally fine as well. And once you're in the mural, you may post your ideas using a sticky note, a text, or writing. And as you see on the screen, what our question is, the question we'd like you to answer right now is, how could equity be important in your service? So we're using a kind of a mind map in this mural. Once you get to the mural, you'll be able to see it, and we'll screen share it in just a second as well. And we're using this mind map to help us brainstorm together. So what we would like you to do is kind of feed off each other's ideas. Feel free to add overarching topics to the topic section or expand upon ideas in the add text fields. You can expand outwards or down or up, whatever makes the most sense. And it might take a couple of clicks to kind of get the hang of it if it's your first time using Mural. So we'll give you, a good minute to start collaborating. Again, the question we're asking here is, how could equity be important in your service? So I'll be quiet. I'll play some light music for about a minute. We'll screen share to see what these responses are, and I'll come back in just a moment. We'll give it about 15 more seconds. Okay, I wanted to say thank you. I could see all the cursors moving around in the mural. It's actually making it a little difficult to see all the responses because there's a bunch coming in. Thank you so much for your participation here. One of the reasons we wanted to use this feature today was so that you could have a chance to look back at the responses even after the webinar. We could share this link in our follow-up email tomorrow as well. And please feel free to continue adding to it so you could see, and collaborate with your colleagues. But thank you so much. I will pass this back to Kathy.
Thank you. Wow, I got to tell you, that was fantastic. Just seeing all those different ideas and threads coming in. Beautiful job. There are things in there that really point to what we're talking about today. So let's dive in and start, particularly with equity and why it's important to digital marketing and to the service that you do. Now, the important question to start with, what is equity? This term has been used a lot because we often don't define what it actually means. The word equity refers to fairness and justice. Now, when there are times when I work out in communities that I can say that, and people think and they stop and they're like, okay, so we just need to make things equal. Here's the thing. Whereas equality means providing the same to all, equity means recognizing that we don't all start from the same place, and we must acknowledge and make adjustments to imbalances. The process is ongoing. It requires us to identify and overcome intentional and unintentional barriers that arise from bias and systematic structures. So, questions sometimes people ask me, so why are we doing this? I want to turn quickly to Chris to talk more about how equity ties into AmeriCorps Vista's mission.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. And just quickly to jump in, and when we look at the why on this, we're looking at equity as a pillar of our strategy because AmeriCorps Vista's mission includes, advancing civil rights, increasing representation in AmeriCorps and national service from the communities we serve. It also includes, supporting tribal communities, addressing limited English proficiency by ensuring language access across the country. So all of these initiatives are grounded in furthering equity and is a big part of AmeriCorps Vista. So I just wanted to jump in and mention that. I'll kick it back to you, Kathy.
Okay. Let's start to just dive into why equity is important to digital marketing. Many organizations are already moving towards equity through DEI, which refers to diversity, equity, and inclusion in a given workplace. These three elements coexist to ensure that organizations wholly validate different perspectives and backgrounds. It's about treating each employee equitably and without harmful prejudices, and really about fostering spaces where all voices are highly valued regardless of age, sex, gender, or race. By championing DEI, organizations aim to create workplaces and communities where all individuals can fully participate and thrive. They recognize and address structural and systematic barriers to equity and inclusion, while they also value and celebrate the differences that make us all unique. Now, more recently, primarily in the public sector, which places like AmeriCorps are starting to champion an expanded version of the acronym. It's not just DEI, it's DEIA, or diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. By expanding DEI to include accessibility, the acronym DEIA explicitly calls out the need to empower people with disabilities as part of the broader movement towards socially just organizations and workplaces. But in reality, accessibility is already integral, not separate from the work that goes into creating a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workplace. To put it simply, there is no DEI without an A. We will be using these terms, the DEI, DEIA, interchangeably throughout this particular webinar. Now, it's one thing to publicly claim to advocate for DEI, but if a nonprofit doesn't accurately pair their words with the internal and external actions, there will inevitably be mistrust. DEI greatly empowers underrepresented, marginalized communities. It's opening doors of opportunity that have been previously remained shut. And it calls for more awareness of certain issues within the workplace that are caused by discriminatory biases. Nonprofit organizations that implement DEI efforts will be sure to witness a radical shift in their own work culture, some of which includes things like higher productivity among employees, an appreciation for diverse perspectives, and a form of unity that fights for solidarity and justice.
Thanks, Kathy. Sorry, I was on mute for a second, but thank you so much for that overview of DEI and DEIA. And now we'll just have a moment for a chat question, just to get some interaction here. We want to turn to you all for your personal experiences. So please share in the chat, in what ways have DEI or DEIA, or if the acronym is maybe slightly different for you in your work field, how's that been part of your workplace, your volunteering or educational experience? So we'll give you a chance to respond in the chat. We'll play a little light music again for 30 to 45 seconds and come right back. All right. Thanks, everyone. Looks like a bunch of responses are just coming in now. So if you're mid-typing, please continue to do so and send those in. Already some great responses. Just scrolling through, seeing everything, from being very well at the forefront of our organization. So learning to value local or indigenous knowledge. Sammy mentioned they just had a training about de-escalation in their workplace today, so it's good timing. Several other answers coming in. Thank you so much. Kathy, I know they're coming in fast and furious now. Any that stand out to you?
Well, and the one that really just made me stop and go, yes, we really take time to listen to members of the community. That's just really critical. There's a lot of great answers on there, lots of great comments in there. This all is going to help us really build everything else that we're doing in this particular session. I'm going to just take us forward just a little bit more. And the question that comes up is, how does digital accessibility fit into DEIA? The widespread unemployment of people with disabilities can be partly attributed to the fact that many organizations rely on inaccessible technology. Digital technology specifically is shaping more and more of what we do in daily life. In order to uphold the values of DEIA, organizations need to ensure that their digital experiences are accessible to all people. But what does that mean in practice? Organizations that commit to diversity, the D in DEIA, embrace differences. That means that internally, they hire, upskill, and promote employees with different racial, gender, and ethnic identities, different class and backgrounds, different abilities, and people who are neurodiverse. And externally, they account for users' various needs and priorities in their products and their messaging. Let's remember, equity is about fairness. An equitable organization offers its employees equal opportunities to succeed and the support they need to do so. Now, in this particular case, while creating a sense of exclusivity is what helps products to sell, creating a culture of inclusivity is what helps your target audience to connect with your brand. So how can we use DEI and other tools to make digital marketing more equitable? Verna Myers is a cultural change catalyst. She's an influencer and an author. And she eloquently defined diversity and inclusion as diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance. Thus, diversity is basically the first step. It's about ensuring that everyone feels like they are invited. In marketing, it means that your content, which is your images, your website, your messaging, things like that, that has to reflect everyone and is communicated via a range of mediums to ensure that the invite is received by everyone. For instance, if the majority of your images include only one racial group, there's room for improvement. Now, that said, some customers and potential recipients of services face barriers. In marketing, it means that your content and communication must be optimized for audiences that experience barriers to access. When we embrace diversity and inclusion in digital marketing campaigns, it increases the likelihood of community engagement. I want to take some time to dive into some common difficulties and how we can use them as learning opportunities to better serve the community. First, we'll begin with discussing some common difficulties people face when incorporating equitable marketing into their work. These challenges are trying to reach an unknown audience, or not fully understanding your impact or a targeted impact, or casting too wide of a net or going too broad. Let's take a look at each of these and some tips to address these difficulties. Number one is the unknown audience. When you don't know who your audience is, it can be difficult to tailor messages to recruit volunteers and build relationships in your community. Whether or not you identify as part of the audience you're targeting, it's important to research and connect with the culture, language, and communication nuances that are associated with your target audience. Taking steps to understand your audience is pivotal to creating successful digital tools. Number two is the unknown impact, that tendency to see things through your own lens of experience and assumptions. We assume that people experience the world the same way we do. I'm going to just share something from my own life. To get around, I use canes or a rolling walker. I was asked to be at a meeting at a large city for work, and I instinctively asked about the disabled parking and how accessible the site is. I was assured it's very accessible, Kathy. Don't worry. I should be sure to park in the lot up on the third floor because there would be disabled parking there if I had my parking decal. So I went. I parked on the third floor as instructed. I still had to go down the elevator to get to the street level. Now, did you know that the elevators aren't always timed so that you can get to the elevator and get in before the door closes? I often find that I have to try a few times to catch the elevator. And if the button to call the elevator is in an odd spot, it takes even longer. So I finally caught the elevator. And once I was down on street level, I still had 3 more blocks to walk. The unevenness of the sidewalks and the large cracks kept catching my rolling walker frequently, which meant there was just a lot of this bouncing and jerking and bouncing and jerking for the entire trip there. I came up to the building within a block and a half of my journey. But the thing of it is, I still couldn't get in because in order to get in at that spot, I actually had to climb a very large set of stairs of approximately 40 steps. Walking with a rolling walker was not going to get me up those stairs. And so instead, I just had to go up to finish that city block and then take the turn to go up the next block up, which was straight uphill. Because again, everything was uphill or up the stairs for this particular location. I finally got to the top of the hill. I kept hitting stairs. And at the very last little 4 feet, I finally hit the flat section that had no stairs. I got to the door and I thought, okay, I'm going to be able to get in. And I couldn't because that door was not open. And they explained to me that I would now need to walk the entire plaza back the other direction, another city block, to get to the other door because that's where security could actually let me in. Now, you may be hearing this and thinking up to this point, wow, this does not sound terribly accessible. And the saga actually continued, but I'm going to stop here and just give us a point to think about the fact that the host agency insisted, oh, it's absolutely accessible. And yet that was not what I experienced just trying to get in. This is a chance to catch ourselves. We assume the impact based on our own lens of experience. While you will not be able to fully predict the impact of your marketing tools and message, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, as well as doing the work to get to know the inner workings of the community you're serving, will better equip you to understand your impact. Let's get to number 3, which is that we go too broad. Marketing is based on the idea that segmentation of your audience is critical. My marketing professor used to tell us, if you try to be everything to everyone, you will be nothing to anyone. They can't tell who you're talking to and who you're not talking to. So this is the question. Who is your nonprofit marketing tool? Well, your marketing team may be aiming to attract a wide variety of audiences. Creating materials that are too broad can inadvertently limit the number of supporters who take interest in your nonprofit. As you dig in, you will need to narrow your focus and in turn, be more intentional with the digital marketing materials that you create. Let's talk about a few tips that'll help you address these challenges. First and foremost, get to know your target audience. You can do this by prioritizing intimacy with your audience and the local community. It's only by growing your understanding of the values, needs, and issues of your target audience, along with the local community, that you're going to be able to transform and create an environment that's more inclusive. If you want to learn about different content, converse with your target audience and allow yourself to be inspired. So let's talk about your audience. To define your audience, first, We have to assess your current supporters. Identify their shared characteristics such as demographics, engagement trends, and interests. Then, I want to ask you to divide your audience into several unique groups with similar goals, problems, and motivations. This way, you can better tailor your messages to each group, and it's going to increase the likelihood that they'll engage with your content. Learn about your audience by asking questions in your community, by doing online research, and by discussing it with your Vista site. Now, once we gather this kind of information, think about how this information helps you connect with your audience. Perhaps there's a cultural reference or a design tactic that you might be able to use. When you're creating your digital materials, be conscious of accessibility and culturally sensitive language. Don't assume, check it. Now, let's look at an example from a Vista member. For today's purposes, we're going to narrow our focus down to engaging individuals as volunteers. And then we're going to narrow it down even more by looking at how we recruit volunteers. In particular, let's discuss what motivates your volunteers. Another tip that I have here is to communicate accessibly. While a lot of the conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion these days focuses on social injustices, it's important to remember that it also refers to ability. So ensure that everyone can read your emails and website, irrespective of their abilities. Also, welcome contributions from underrepresented groups. Now, that means let's keep it sensible, moderate, and focus on our tone of voice. When it comes to creating content, your focus should be on creating a sense of belonging for all. This means that your content should make everyone feel welcome by speaking to different user types instead of highlighting how users differ from one another. If you need some inspiration, you can check out the Conscious Style Guide. This was created by Karen Ying. Here you will find plenty of resources to help you write about ethnicity, race, nationality, disability, age, gender, sex, and sexuality. So let's create a persona of the ideal volunteers that we're looking for. Now, some of you may be asking, well, what exactly is a persona? It's a detailed, semi-fictional representation of your target customer. We create it by quantitative and qualitative data about existing customers and market research. Let's dig into the data that your organization already has. We want to start to explore your marketing database so we can identify people who match your target categories. Select some interviewees and let's start talking to them. To understand what matters to your audience members and to understand what motivates them to take action, you need to talk to them. Try to gather some of the following types of information when you talk. Number one, what is some of the basic demographic information? Number two, how did they first hear about your particular organization? Number three, what motivated them to interact with your organization? Number four, what keeps them engaged with your organization? Number five, what challenges does engaging with your organization help them overcome? Number six, what other organizations do they support? And last, number seven, where do they like to find the information they get? The next step in this process is to summarize your findings. Once you have completed this process, you will have a lot of rich data about the people who interact with your organization. This is the time to compare data among the interviewees from the same audience category to see what themes that actually start to emerge and to see if you can start to define a single persona for each audience category. Your persona will eventually look something like this, where you create a composite of your persona with a name and an image of your fictional persona. What are the background and demographics for your persona? What are the real quotes that participants said about their goals, their challenges, things like that that you asked them about? What are the goals that this persona wants? What challenges and struggles do they face in relation to meeting their goals? What are their identifiers? How do they prefer to communicate? What social media platforms do they use? What can we do to help their persona achieve their goals, overcome their challenges? And ultimately, the question becomes, what is your marketing message to them? We've included this in the handout for your reference so that you can look at it later as you continue to do your audience research. Now, some of the core questions you're going to want to start to answer include getting at the common objections. Why wouldn't they want to participate in your project? This is the time to start to create a list and then to think about what are your potential responses that you can use to actually address their concerns. The second area is the marketing messaging. How can you describe your solution so that you have the biggest impact on your persona? What resonates most with your persona? This is the time to create a list of why they would want to use their time and energy to participate. And the third one is the elevator pitch or bumper sticker. This is where you get a chance to sell your persona on your solution, but you're going to do it in a sentence or a few words. We don't typically have a lot of time to connect with a potential volunteer. How can we quickly and succinctly tell them about this opportunity? This is the time to boil it down. What key words will be critical to connect with them? I'm going to invite you to meet Samantha. She's a Vista volunteer who is recruiting volunteers to help her organize and hold a blood drive in her service community. To figure out who she's marketing to, Samantha will need to start with, what action do I want them to take, and to create a list. Then Samantha will identify who are the people who want to take these actions. Checking in with her own organization's data, she will want to start to ask, who has been participating in blood drives in this area? And once she has that information, it's time to further explore, who hasn't my organization been engaging with in the past? How do we reach them now? Samantha discovers that her target audience is the Latino population in her community. Through her research, she finds that her organization has had low engagements with this group in the past, despite the fact that many community health centers are organized by the local Latino groups. Once she knows who her target audience is, Samantha will learn about the audience. To do this, she decides to ask her Vista supervisor to connect her with the leader of the local Hispanic community center. When she meets with the leader of the community center, Samantha asks her questions about how to engage with the local Latino population. The community center leader mentions a Facebook group that many community members used in order to keep in touch with what's happening locally. She also recommends that Samantha create her marketing post in both English and Spanish and offers to translate the post for her. Now, we are going to start to dive into some of the best practices for employing equitable digital your Vista service. First, we'll discuss choosing your method and medium, and then inclusive design. When we talk about the method, we're talking about the strategy or the tactic you are using to market your message. Some methods you might use would include email marketing, social media marketing, or content marketing. These could be things like blogs, articles, and newsletters. Like the steps we've covered to consider our audience, you'll want to consider your your method by first reflecting and then identifying what method will be best for your particular target audience. Let's take a look back at Samantha. In her organization, they had previously used printed flyers as their main forms of marketing for volunteer recruitment. After reflecting on her target population, Samantha chooses to add some social media marketing as an additional method and hopes that it will reach a wider range of potential volunteers. The medium is where we hone in on the specific platform or route we will use to distribute the message. Let's return to Samantha and how she incorporates this into her volunteer recruitment task. In her reflection on her organization, Samantha identified that the past social media marketing initiatives generally were made through LinkedIn, and that hadn't attracted many volunteers, especially in her target audience. Samantha remembered the tip that the Hispanic community leader shared, and she chose instead to focus her volunteer recruitment on Facebook. She joined some local Facebook groups and prepares her posts in English and Spanish to reach her audience. She also continues to use flyers to connect with another existing target population, since she continues to find volunteers through the local library and at universities through this method.
Thanks, Kathy. Now, let's take a short pause from our example that Kathy was sharing about Samantha for a chat question to learn about your experiences. So our chat question here is, if you were the target audience, what method and medium would reach you? So we want you to think as specifically as possible here, and you'll have a minute or so to respond in the chat, and you can reply again with a couple of words or a couple of sentences, whatever you feel is best. But again, the question, if you were the target audience, what method and medium would reach you? And just as a reminder, your method is the strategy or tactic used to market your message. The medium is the platform or route used to distribute your message. So we'll give it a moment and come back in just a second. Okay, thanks to everyone for throwing the responses in the chat. Great responses, and keep them coming, please. Seem to see a theme, at least on my end. Looks like email, text, and various social media were the top responses that I could see in the chat. Kathy, how about you? Did you see any other unique items or anything that?
Looking at them, Chris, is that Nextdoor kept popping up as a new social media one that I don't typically see. So that was exciting to see that, here's the new trend of where people are going. The other one that I thought was interesting is how many people said radio. And it's always an interesting conversation doing this kind of work, because the next question becomes, which station? This is, again, goes back to the channel. Do we want country? Do we want hip hop? What station are we looking at? But these are all great comments and that they have in here. Thank you, everybody, for participating in our chat question. It's great to put yourself in the shoes of the audience, to really start to think deeply about how do we connect. Now, the next question I'm going to ask you to think about is, would that media method or media reach other members of your family? That's the thing that we want to start to take a little closer look at. In this inclusive design, now that we've gone in depth about who we are connecting with and how we're going to do it, let's talk a bit about what we are using to connect. The actual materials, whether it be a post or an advertisement or a digital flyer, we want to make sure that it is designed with inclusive design practices in mind. Inclusive design is the design choices you make to create materials that are inclusive and accessible by your audience. You can ask yourself, are these materials accessible and inclusive? Let's go through some key elements to pay attention to as you're creating a digital marketing piece. The first one is clarity, making sure that your message is clear. Also thinking about the fonts, making sure that the fonts you use are readable. The images, making sure the meaning of the image you use are accessible to everyone. And last is functionality, making sure that the materials you create work for everyone. We'll go deeper now and talk a little bit more about making sure that we hit all of these. Is the ad's creative call to action clear? Now, I realize some people will be like, wait, what's a call to action? That call to action, or CTA, is a marketing term, and it refers to the next step a marketer wants its audience or reader to take. Calls to action can be direct, such as a button that says buy now, or it could be a softer CTA, such as read more. The nature of the call to action, or the CTA, varies by the advertising medium. For example, a television ad for a charity organization may end with a CTA that directs people to call a 1-800 number or to visit a website, whereas a charity's monthly e-newsletter may just contain a donate now button in the body. Making sure the call to action is clear is more important than any catchy slogan that you might use. When it comes to the fonts, are the fonts displayed with readability in mind? Now, there are many standard and widely available fonts that score highly for web accessibility. The most accessible fonts are Tahoma, Calibri, Havelica, Arial, Vendana, and Times New Roman. Even with an inclusive font, however, you'll want to pay attention to the color contrast and the size. On the left, we have an example of a non-accessible font and color choice, whereas on the right, we have an example of an accessible font and color choice. I really highly recommend using a professional color contrast checker tool, like the site Improve Color Contrast Checker, because it's the easiest and most reliable way to check the accessibility of your web text color and contrast ratios. And I believe we're going to make that link available to people as we go forward. Now, the next one is thinking about images. Will you be using images instead of text to tell a story? If so, you'll need alternative text or alt text, or else you might call them captions, to explain the message being conveyed to non-sighted readers. Adding textual descriptions to your images helps make your digital materials accessible to all users. So people may wonder, well, how do I write a good alt text? First thing, define your goals. The same image can tell many different stories. So the question you have to ask is, what's your point with this image? Second step, add relevant keywords. Third, describe the image accurately and keep it shortish. The recommendation is to write a maximum of 125 characters. That's characters, just to be clear. Otherwise, your alt text might be not readable by some of the different search engines. For example, on the screen, we have an image that we have used in this presentation that would require an alt text. On the right-hand side, you're going to see a screenshot of how to input alt text. And this panel is generally found when selecting, you right-click on the image and then select View alt text when you're working in Microsoft Word or in PowerPoint. Here, in this particular case, the alt text for this particular image, we would state it as a close-up of a phone screen that displays the accessibility option. Let's talk about functionality. The question we have to start to ask is the landing page for this campaign designed with accessibility in mind? Ask yourself, could someone using assistive technology navigate the campaign target pages? If you're using links or redirecting people to the organization's website so that they can complete an application or learn more, do some digging to see if that site is already accessible. Although this is not something in your direct control, it's at least important to be aware of whether it actually is. When it comes to sustainability, we want to ensure that your organizational digital marketing materials continue sustainably to be inclusive. So we want to start to collect formal and informal information from participants after the fact. Note and share best practices with your management or your leadership team, and continue to improve and refine your methods going forward in the future.
Thanks so much, Kathy. And I know we're going to get to some questions in just a bit, but thank you and for the wonderful points to bring us to our summary for the moment. Now today we have discussed equity and its importance to digital marketing, specifically in your business service as you create materials for volunteer recruitment. We have explored some key areas to investigate when creating digital marketing materials, specifically here to understand your audience and the method and medium through which you will connect with them. And then finally, we have touched on some inclusive design principles that you can incorporate when creating your digital marketing materials that Kathy just referenced. So now let's put those pieces together and have a quick review question. We'll be using Samantha's Vista service again. So to check in on this and see how well you have followed today's conversation, we have this question: which is the most essential change that Samantha should make to improve this post that you see on the screen? So take a moment to look at the post and then think about the answer options before you respond. The poll should be popping up, and you might have to move the poll box if you have to go back and look at the post on the screen. So we'll give you a good, 30 to 45 seconds again to respond and come back in just a second. Okay, we'll give it about 5 to 10 more seconds. Looks like there's several still just responding now. See a bunch coming in. Okay, it does look like it's slowing down. So a little drum roll and let's close it out. So thank you for your participation in that review question, and let's take a look at the results. So it does look like 76%, so 3/4 of you did select answer option B. Which tool can Samantha use to improve this digital marketing post in order to recruit volunteers with a blood drive? Including a clearer call to action, or CTA, was the answer for this question. Great job, everyone, and thank you so much for your participation there. And just continuing on, we have seen a couple questions in the chat about, some of the references that Kathy has mentioned. So if you want to learn more, here's some tools we recommend you review, further study. First, the Conscious Style Guide that we discussed earlier in the presentation. This resource has a wealth of information to explore as you create your own digital marketing materials. Another great tool you can use or access is the Improved Accessibility Checker as well. So we drop links in there. These links are also included in the handouts. Again, if you can't access the handout right now, we will be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow that includes that handout, so you'll have access to these links. And yeah, before we get to Q&A, we like to shift gears and just ask that you think about this webinar, how it went, and we want to get your feedback on it. Your input truly is valuable for us. We review the content and all of your feedback for all of these webinars to determine future topics, how we can improve the presentation, what worked, what maybe didn't. So please take just a couple moments, a very quick survey to complete it, and I thank you in advance for sharing your feedback. Should be a link in the chat. Yeah, it looks like, I believe Steve dropped a link in the chat to the, yeah, Steve just dropped a link in the chat to the survey, and it should pop up in your browser as you exit. Okay, so getting to Q&A, I want to remind you all, please, if you have questions for Kathy, please select the Q&A function. We have a couple of minutes here, not too long, but please continue to send these in. Just to answer a couple of the questions that already came in, friendly reminder, this is being recorded. We will send a link to the recording and the handouts. That includes a copy of the slides. We'll send that tomorrow So good question. And yep, similar question here that we just saw in the chat as well about the reference. Those will be included. Links to those, anything referenced will be included in the handout. Any questions, any other answered questions, Kathy, that you've seen? I don't see any specific ones.
There were some great things in there talking about like Canva and can Canva help? You can create a lot of great things in Canva. It won't be able to screen for you necessarily, but it will actually help you do some of the layout along the way. It would be good to then be able to test it against the screeners just to say, how does it compare? Do I have to make any adjustments in colors as I go forward? I'm also seeing a lot of people going, hey, AI is out there now. It can help in these tasks. AI can be extremely helpful. You always just have to be careful. It's the dance between AI only goes up to a particular point in time. And so if you're looking for accuracy in information, it may not always be on target. So you always have to cross-check it to make sure that the material is actually there. But it's a great way to generate some new ideas very quickly. I'm just peeking through here. The chat has quite a few. Let's see. Are there trainings on using specific digital tools and platforms? I don't know what you guys will have going forward, but there are a variety out there that'll help you get to, if you want to work on a particular platform, to start to say, like, which one will I want to actually use? There's research and data out there that says, for example, different generations, depending on which generation that you're talking about, age-wise, what's their tendency, which social media do they tend to use, and how do they use it, for what purpose? For example, if you're talking with people who are in the boomers age range, they tend to do that because they're trying to keep track of one another as far as their family and things like that. They wouldn't necessarily be looking necessarily for other information from that, but they like to be able to keep in touch on what it is that their family's doing. Whereas you get other generations who do it for different purposes. When you know those particulars of why they do it, where they go, how they tend to use it, you can be much more targeted in how you choose which channels you want for which age group, depending on who you're going after. Same kind of thing. I think I look at some of the different information that's out there on blogs. What I think is fascinating about blogs is that for communities of color, they've been some of the greatest leaders in actually doing a lot of great work on blogs. What I also find interesting when I look into the research is that when they look at, say, who is it that's actually get hired and paid for working on blogs at their agencies, that tends to be more folks within the white community. And so it becomes there's a difference there of people are in fact blogging, but they may not be getting paid to do that particular piece. But it's a tremendous opportunity to maybe look at upscaling people for work, but two, actually getting that genuine voice out there for your organization, because people choose to blog and participate in that way and share on some of the activities that you're talking about because they themselves have experienced it. Just some things along that line. Are you guys seeing anything else that I should make sure I address?
Thank you so much, Kathy. Thanks for the context. If anyone does still have a question and they're mid-typing it in the Q&A, continue to do so. We can at least hang on and respond to those in the Q&A as well. But just looking at, it does look like, well, it depends on how fast you can do this, Kathy. Okay. There is a question that came in. How do we sell this knowledge, strategies, training ideas to our host sites? Where it mentions the adaptation to change gaps are real challenges to overcome. Any strategy? I feel like this could be a lengthy response, but do you have any?
What I would do, step one is the fact that most of our nonprofits that have like 50 or less employees aren't actually doing very much in digital marketing, and we should be. We're missing out on a goldmine of opportunity. So step one will be getting them to open up to doing digital marketing. But here's the real plus. if they don't have anything that already exists, which is true, a number of things, this is where you can actually build in equity already as part of the ground floor. You don't have to like change things that people have already done because they haven't done it yet. So you can get them going in digital marketing and set the groundwork and their framework so that they are doing it in a good way at the very start. So look at it as the opportunity as opposed to the challenge, strictly the challenge. But they could really expand their outreach if they got more involved in the digital marketing process. It would be the opportunity for automation, time saving, and that's usually the big thing that executive directors are looking like, how can we have anything else? We have no time. Automation, things like that are things that are going to save them so much time if they put the infrastructure in place on the front end. Hope that helps.
Thanks, Kathy. And with just a minute left, just want to briefly mention a question just came in as well about whether this is recorded. Again, yes, this is recorded, and we'll send a follow-up email tomorrow once everything's posted to the campus. As a friendly reminder, you can just log on to the campus. Then once logged on, you can click on catalog at the top, and that'll bring you to the learning paths available. Once you're at the learning paths, this will be posted under the volunteer management learning path. So you can search for this or filter it by members to find that volunteer management learning path. You may have to enroll and to join it, but that's just a couple of quick steps. And once you join the learning path, you can browse through all of the available recorded webinars at your leisure. There's some on like digital marketing for volunteer recruitment. So there was another question that popped up about that. There's some other webinars, recorded webinars on the topic as well. But thank you for attending today. We hope you can join us for our next webinar called The Power of Telling Your Vista Story. We will meet again on Wednesday, November 15th, and the webinar will be held at the exact same time, starting at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And you can register for that November webinar now if you'd like, and view upcoming events on the Vista Campus calendar. Just click calendar from the main menu, and then a blue or green dot will indicate an event for that day. So if you click on November 15th, you'll see the description appear below it and a link to register for the webinar. We hope to see you there. I'm sorry that we went over by a minute. I don't like to do that. My apologies, but thank you so much for your time and for your participation today. Kathy, thank you for your expertise and your patience on the question, on the Q&A. Thanks everyone for your service. This will conclude the webinar. Feel free to log off unless you have a pending question that you'd like us to answer in the Q&A. But thank you. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, everyone.